Hey guys, and welcome to the Old Ultra Runner channel. I'm your host, Jay Tynert. Today I just wanted to kind of do a review of the year 2020 running wise. I know we're almost to the end of March, but I'm a newer channel and I'm just getting around to doing this. I wanted to kind of review it because I thought it was an interesting year. It was definitely a lot of bad things with the coronavirus, shutting things down. It closed down races. It made it to where I couldn't go see my trail running friends or my other running friends very much during the year. Starting middle of March, they shut down my work. I wasn't going into the office, so I was pretty well isolated at home. But as the old saying goes, I wanted to try to when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So I tried to make the best of it from a running perspective. And there were some advantages to it in that I was no longer traveling back and forth to work. That gave me over an extra hour a day. I think I threw more of that into running. It was running even with a mask on and going outside, at least got me out of the house, got me doing something. And I would see people out on the trails. Even if we were staying distanced and had our mask on, it was still at least felt like a little bit of social interaction. You would say hello to people or something through the mask. But anyway, I just wanted to go kind of through a review of my 2020 year. And in a lot of ways, running wise, it was a very successful year. At the very beginning of the year, I had a pretty good 2019 that finished with me doing over 100 miles at Perpetual Motion 24-hour race. But we went into the beginning of 2020. Things were hitting on all cylinders. I felt pretty good about things. I ran my first race. It was the Nob Hills trail race. It was a 25K. The race didn't exactly, even at the very beginning of the year, go exactly to plan because we'd had a lot of rains and the trail was flooded. The Denton Area Runners Club that puts on that race did an amazing job allowing us to have a race, though. The race normally meets at a scout barn is the location. It's a scouting place that scouting people use the barn. But it was at our facility, and then you would run a little bit and get to the trails and run on them, but the trails were closed. Well, they got permission and they went and carved out a course on the property of the scout where the scout barn is, and we kind of ran. It was a lot of weaving back and forth to get some miles, and then we did part of the loop on the road to make a loop. And yet, for the 25K, I think I did the loop twice. I think it was twice, maybe it was 3 times. I can't really remember. But they did an amazing job even getting a race on. I mean, they cut out this course and made a course in the last week so they could hold the event. But I didn't run super fast, but I enjoyed it. It was fun to see people, and they did a really good job getting a race, being able to put on a race at all. So that was toward the end of January. I think it was the second or third weekend in January. The next weekend in January, I did the Running the Rose 54K. That's out in Tyler, Texas, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I mean, where I live anyway. And that's a beautiful course out at Tyler State Park. I do it most years. I did it again this year. But I finished that race. Wasn't, again, super fast, but I felt pretty good. I actually ran a decent time for me. And it turned out I ended up winning my age group. The 50 and over Masters age group, which I really don't remember what the prize was. Oftentimes it's just a handmade bar of soap or something like that. So I really don't remember exactly what that was, but it got me some points for the Trot Cup in the 50 and over category. So that was good. The next race I did was my big Jackalope Jam race. That was the third weekend in February. Again, COVID hadn't started yet. I mean, it wasn't in the U.S. We weren't shut down yet. Of course, it had been discovered in China, but we didn't know it was going to come here, at least to the degree it did at that point. So went to Jackalope Jam. I was signed up for the 48-hour race. The year before, I had jumped into it having had a concussion in late 2018 going into 2019, and went into Jackalope Jam very undertrained. And I managed to do 130 miles there. So my goal this year was to go, and I felt like I could really aim for the 48 hour, and I thought I could do 150 miles. That was my goal. Didn't quite work out that way, but I still had a great time and a good race. I started out the race, I felt terrible at the beginning. Within an hour or two, I was having stomach problems, spending a lot of time going to the little porta-john. And then even once that issue stopped, I just really didn't feel good. The whole first day and through the night and most of the second day until in the afternoon. So I was 32 hours into the 48-hour race, and I'd only covered 91 miles. Running 150 did not look very doable. But then strange thing happened. All of a sudden, everything came good. I felt great. Best I've ever felt for sure that far into a long event like that. So I felt awesome. I started moving good. I was running well. At that point in the actual race itself, I was probably, I don't know, 12th place or something like that. I don't know. And usually you jump up some when you go, if you keep going past 100 miles, because in a race like that, in the 24 or 48 hour race, a lot of people will get to the 100-mile mark and they'll stop because they've met their goal, they've got their belt buckle for the 100 miles. So, but I was feeling good, and I started really moving. I was running real well. Now sometime after midnight, I started having a problem with a body lean. I was leaning, my whole body started leaning to the right, but I was still running well. I was still moving up, and I moved up into the top 5. I moved up into 4th, the 3rd, 2nd, and finally at about 4 a.m., I actually moved into the lead. I was actually leading the race for a little bit, but I went out on the next loop that actually gave me the lead, and I was leaning so bad I got to where I couldn't even stand up straight. I couldn't walk straight. I kept wandering off catching myself going out into a field and stuff. And some friends of mine on the course stuck with me to help finish the loop so I could get back. And my race was basically done when I finished that loop. I got to the end of that loop. That loop, 1.5 mile loop, took me almost an hour to get around. I was moving so slowly and having trouble walking straight. So I finished that loop. It was at about 5 a.m. So the race had started at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. There were still 4 hours to go in the 48 hour, but I was done. I couldn't continue. I was at 136.5 miles. Second place was at 135. They had actually laid down to take a rest, but they of course just got up a little bit later. I was done. They got up and walked a few loops and won first place. They finished with like 141, and I ended up with my 136.5. But I was very happy still. I finished second. It was still the furthest I'd ever gone. I felt like I had a couple opportunities that could have, I still think 150 miles in a 48 hour race for me is quite doable. If I hadn't felt so bad the first 32 hours, I could have done a lot more miles. And then if I hadn't had the problem at the end with the leaning and problem, I still think I had a shot at 150 miles in those last 4 hours. To go 14 miles was quite doable the way I was moving. So very happy with second place, and I'm hopeful that I can do better in the future. I had high hopes that this year I would be able to take another shot at the 150, but then the race got canceled this year because of the weather. We had the big snowstorm and the electricity loss throughout of the state of Texas that happened that week. So anyway, this is the belt buckle I got for, I don't know if you can see it at all, belt buckle I got for going 100 miles at Jackalope Jam this past in 2020. That was basically the end of my in-person races for a while, because just a few weeks later, I think 3 weeks later, everything got shut down because of COVID. I was signed up for several other trail races and several other races, and they were all getting canceled or postponed. I was a little bit down at first, but then I had signed up for like a real trail marathon that was supposed to have happened in March, right around the time of the shutdown. Well, it became a virtual race, and so I did that. I think I did it a few weeks later. It might have been early April. And then the trail running company, I had done a lot of races, started putting on a lot of virtual races. And so I actually signed up for several of them. I wanted to, if nothing else, I wanted to support them. I didn't want them to go out of business. We did lose a lot of race companies in 2020 when the things got closed down and the people couldn't make a profit. The race director, Trail Racing Over Texas, that puts on a lot of races in Texas, he puts on probably around 20 races per year. I really didn't want them to go away. So I did several of their virtual races to support them, to try to keep them going. In turn, he's buying t-shirts that keep t-shirt vendors in business. They're buying medals from the medal providers that normally would lose a lot of their business. I think it helps keep a lot of people in business when we did some of the virtual races. So I did several virtual races. I have written down that I did 11. Through the year, I did 9 in-person races of marathon or longer. Now, one of those was the running the rows that I did at the beginning of the year. One of them was the Jackalope Jam that I did. Late in the year, I was able to do a race series of 5 races, timed races. I'll get to that in a little bit. So I was able to do 5 races there of marathon or longer. I did the Texas Triple a little later, which was 3 marathons. So those were all in person. But on the year, I ended up with 9 races of marathon or longer and 11 virtual races of marathon or longer. 2 of the longer virtual races I did a 100K. It was the Crazy Desert 100K, which actually was much easier probably doing it on the treadmill than the real one, because the real course is actually a pretty tough course out in San Angelo, Texas. But I did it as a virtual. I got the 100K belt buckle. And I also did the Brazos Spin 100K, and that one is usually on a flat, fast course down close to Houston, a very pretty little park, but it went virtual. Now that one I did not on the treadmill, but I did outside, but it was still, it's quite actually a challenge doing long races like 50 miles and 100K on your own. But I set up my own little support station in the front of the house, a table and a chair and an ice chest, and I would come back the first few loops, I think I did 11-mile loops or something, and then I started going to 6 to 8-mile loops, and I'd come back by the chair and restock and then head back out. Anyway, as the year continued, I did a few of those virtual races, but then I still wasn't real sure how motivated I could stay. So about late April, I guess it was late April. Lazarus Lake, famous for putting on the Barkley marathons and the Big Backyard Ultra and a bunch of those big races, came up with he does a race across Tennessee in the summer normally, the last great Fall State. But this year, since he wasn't able to put on the Vol State race, he put on the great virtual race across Tennessee. And it was supposed to be 1,000K, and you had 4 months to do it. It actually was a little over 1,000K, but it was like 635 miles that you were supposed to do in 4 months. I decided I'd go ahead and do that because I said, well, that's probably 160 miles a month. That's about what I normally do, and it'll keep me doing miles during the summer. So I decided to sign up. I did the great virtual race across Tennessee, and this is my belt buckle for doing the 1,000K. Now, I became a little bit competitive during that. I started running lots of miles. The most I had ever run in a month, I think, was about 310 miles. I might have done 300 miles in a month twice before that. But in the month of May, between the virtual races, and I also discovered in the middle of May, I had always thought about, I'd seen Ricky Gates running the Every Single Street of San Francisco. And that had intrigued me. And I had thought at some point I wanted to run every single street of my little town of Bedford. But I had always thought I would do it after I retired. I was planning to get a map, draw it all out. But then I found out a friend of mine, John Layton, was doing it right then. And he had found a website, citystrides.org, that will map it for you. You run and your GPS loads to the City Strides site, and it'll mark off the streets you have and show you what you have left. So I decided, in addition to running the virtual races and trying to get across Tennessee, I would start running the streets of Bedford. It kind of gave me a goal each day to go out and hit new streets. It made it a little more interesting. I wasn't seeing people, so I might as well see much of the city as I could. So I wore my mask and I was out running the streets. And then I became, as my miles started gathering up, I started seeing I was going to finish the thing. I was one of the top mile people, and I wanted to finish up fairly high as far as how quickly I got across Tennessee in the virtual race. So I did over 400 miles in May, by far the most miles I had ever done in a month. I continued that in June, and I did another 400 and something miles in June. And in addition to doing, one of those was the 100K. I can't remember which of the 200Ks I did then. And I finished the streets of Bedford in June. Well, after I finished the streets of Bedford, I just moved on to Euless, the next little city over, and I started doing those streets. And I ended up completing the streets of Euless in early August. So I finished Bedford and Euless. And to give you an idea how large that is, I think Bedford said 752 streets. I don't know exactly how many miles that is. I did go on a city's website and searched and tried to figure out, and they said they maintain like 450 or 460 miles of streets. So that gives you an approximate how many miles of streets I actually ran. And of course you do a little bit more because you you backtrack over some. You go out and you run some, and then you come back over a street you've already run. It's hard to be perfect and only run all the streets just once and not do anything else. Euless, I don't know exactly how many miles it was. It actually was 670 something streets, but I think some of the streets were longer in Euless, and it had an area going through the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, which was not real pleasant. But it was a very interesting experience. It was fun. I got to see a lot of parts of the city that I normally don't go into, and it really increased the challenge. And as far as finishing the great virtual race across Tennessee, I think I was in the top 300 runners getting across. Out of 19,000 that were signed up, I was one of the first 300 that got across Tennessee. And then I actually made it because I continued, and I ran 400 plus miles in May, June, and July. I finished the second crossing on July 31st. I made it all the way across and all the way across again. So I got the little double crosser piece of paper, which is kind of cool. for finishing them both. I finished that. I had done a lot of virtual races during that time. I kind of started slowing down on my mileage. I backed off a little bit in August. I thought I was going to take it real easy, but I think I still did 250 or 280 miles. I don't remember what it was in August. Then we went into the fall. One of the races that I had been signed up for in the spring that got postponed was, there's a little marathon series that normally happens out at Bachman Lake in Dallas, where you run 8 loops and a little bit to make a marathon, and you run. It was called the Texas Triple. There was a marathon. It was supposed to be on each of the 3 days of Memorial Day weekend. We would have run the Saturday, Sunday, and the Monday of Memorial Day, but it got postponed. They actually were able to hold it with social distancing and staggered starts and a lot of precautions. She was actually able to put on the race in over Labor Day. So it was called the Texas Triple, which is normally on Memorial Day, but they did it on Labor Day. I went and did it. It was extremely hot. It was getting up to like mid-90s every day. It might even been close to 100 one of the days, I don't remember. But each day I got a medal. They're up there, I won't pull it down, but they're little medals that say Texas Triple 26.2 or 13.1. I did the 26.2 each day. And then I ended up with this one that says Texas Triple Finisher. So I finished 3 marathons in 3 days, which was the first time I'd ever done that. I'd done back-to-back marathons on 2 different days, but I had never done 3 in a row. So that was cool. Then starting in the middle of middle of September, there's a race series that I do every fall for the last 3 years that Wrath Racing puts on. Wrath Racing is owned by a friend of mine, and her husband, that put on local marathon and long distance endurance races, often longer than a marathon. They put on the Perpetual Motion I do every year. They put on this Hula Loop series, and they put on a race. Well, they put on a couple others. They put on the Dalmatian races, which are marathons and half marathons that are usually in February, and then they put on a Texas Endurance Challenge that's of all months, August in Texas when it's blazing hot. And I'd actually forgot to tell you, back in February, I was awarded Rathlete of the Year in February 2020, and I got this cool jacket that says Wrath Racing on it. Now that one, I was called the 2020 Rathlete of the Year, but I really don't talk about that as a lot as a 2020 accomplishment, because that was more based on things that I did well in 2019. But still very proud of that jacket. It was very cool to get that back in February. I wore that jacket when I went to Jackalope Jam a few weeks later. Very nice. Anyway, they had the Hula Loop series. They were able to hold it. Now it got a lot of the venues. They hold it a lot of little local parks. And it's road running. It's 6-hour timed races. Each week, it's usually every other week for 5 weeks. And she holds it in different parks, usually in the mid-cities, Hurst, Euless, Bedford, Irving, Arlington, a lot of the little local cities through the middle of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. You'll find a park, and then we'll do loops. And the loops are anywhere usually from 3/4 of a mile that you do over and over and over to 2 miles or 2.5 miles. And you just do the loops over and over, and whoever goes the furthest wins. And then there's points for where you place each week, and then if someone's tied at the end, you add up the total distance for the entire five races. Anyway, this year the venues kept having to get changed because some cities would not allow it, some cities would allow it. She was able to hold it. She found one of the local cities, Hurst, allowed a lot of them. So we actually did, I think I don't know if it's 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 5 races ended up being in Hearst because the other cities all canceled and didn't allow us to run. But we ran in these races mostly in Hearst. They're not huge fields, and she didn't really publicize it this year because of COVID. She wanted to keep the numbers down, not have a crowd. We again stayed socially distanced. We kept our masks on at the start. We kept our masks on when we went through aid stations, and then when we were running close to each other. But we were able to hold the series. So each of the 5 weeks, I at least did a marathon. I don't think this year I never ran a full 50K in the 6 hours. Now there were a couple weeks that I went ahead and I would finish maybe 28 miles, and I'd go ahead and do another 3 afterwards, and then call it one of my virtual 50Ks for the trot virtual races. But so I ran each of the 5. Each of them I did at least a marathon. I ended up winning 1 week outright, and I won the series this year. I'm actually the 3-time champion of the male division of the Hula Loop series. So I won this nice little plaque with my picture, and there's a nice little plate down here that says Hula Loop 2020 series winner and my mileage, which was 140.99 in the 5 weeks. So that was very cool. She does a really good job on that races. You get an extra point for doing a half marathon. You get a point for doing an extra point for doing a full marathon. Then you can get bonus points for dressing in a tropical costume of some type. So real often I would wear a lei or put a flowery thing in my hat. Sometimes you run in a Hawaiian shirt or something like that. And it just makes it fun. And you see a lot of the same people week after week, and you get to socialize and get to know a lot of these same crazy people. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. So I did that series. I was able to do the 5 races. I think after that was done, we were supposed to have Perpetual Motion, which is the race that I have actually finished the previous 2 years. I had finished 3rd and 1st in the 24-hour. I was really looking forward to it this year. I had actually decided just to do the 12-hour. I was just feeling a little tired after all those miles, but it ended up, there were switching of venues a few times. It looked like it was going to happen, and then like 2 or 3 days before the race, it finally got canceled. They decided we weren't going to be allowed. We couldn't get the permit. The permit looked like it was going to come through, and then it got blocked at the last minute, and the race they weren't able to hold it. So they put it on as a virtual race, gave everyone the option to do it as a virtual race. So I did that race as a virtual this year. I did the 12 hours. Now I didn't have a real good day. I didn't feel real well running on my own that day. I wasn't real proud of the distance, but it was okay. I did 46 point something miles, which actually placed me 3rd. And that Rath, Kay Layton, who owns Rath Racing, she's such an amazing race director. She said she had already bought all the awards and stuff for that race, so she decided just to give them out to the virtual people, which is a little bit unusual. But so anyway, I did end up finishing 3rd in the 12-hour, and I got this neat little crystal award. I don't know if you can see it, and then it has a plaque with my name and the distance I did. I've now gotten a collection of those because like I said, the previous 2 years I finished 3rd and 1st in the 24 hours. So I've now got 3 of those crystal awards. The 1 year that I won was a bigger one. So that was great. So anyway, and then I had one final race I did after that. I signed up for, it's a virtual race they do every year on the treadmill. It's called the Dreadmill 100. You can see it on ultrasignup.com. I had been a little bit intrigued by that because I do run on a treadmill some at home. I try to do most of my miles outside, but I do have a treadmill, and I use it for hill training, and I'll use it when it's wimpy, when it's 100 degrees outside. I may run inside. I did a little less this year because I was running so many of the streets of Bedford and Euless, but I'll run on the treadmill when it's cold or rainy or whatever. So I had done, I think the furthest I'd ever really run on a marathon until on the treadmill until 2020 was probably around a 20 or 25 mile run. I'm not sure. I had done the 100K for Crazy Desert, and this year on the treadmill, so I decided I wanted to sign up for the Dreadmill 100 and see if I could run 100 miles on the treadmill. It was quite an experience. It's hard on your own. I set up my own little aid station next to it. I'd have to stop the treadmill, take potty breaks. Occasionally I'd go refill. I had a table over here with a bunch of supplies that was next to the treadmill. I would go mix up more tailwind or go get food. But I'd have to get off the treadmill, refill my bottles every so many hours, and then keep running. And I did take a pretty good length break. I started, I don't remember, 7 or 8 in the morning. Around 8 or 9 that night, I'd been going 12 or 13 hours. I took a pretty good break. I went and ate with my family. I went and actually took a shower, so I felt a little better. And I came down and I finished the run, ran through the night. Now I have a TV in here next to the treadmill, so I had tons of stuff from Amazon Prime queued up, from Netflix Prime. I picked out a bunch of things ahead of time that I could watch that kind of made the time pass, but it was still pretty boring. Now what I found out the most about running on the treadmill is it is very hard on your feet. My big toes, I guess they move up in the shoe. I never really realized it in shorter runs, but it put a lot of stress on my big toes and my toenails. And I got 20 miles in and my toenails were really hurt. So I kept trying to go to my bigger shoes and unlace them more to make it looser, but it was just still very painful, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to finish. I got to about the 100K mark, the 62 mile mark, and I got out a pair of my old shoes. I don't have them in here. And I went and got a knife, and I cut a big hole where the big toe is. That helped a ton. It took the pressure off my toes. I don't think I'm ever going to go to a 24, 48 hour, 100 mile race without bringing scissors or a knife that I could cut open a shoe like that, because man, that helped a lot. I don't think I would have finished any other way. But I was able to finish it. I did it in 22 hours and 27 minutes. I got this belt buckle, 100 mile Dreadmill belt buckle for finishing that. Still felt like a pretty good accomplishment. It took about a month, and I lost one of my toenails, big toenails, and then the other one just fell off after over 2 months. Anyway, kind of gross, but I lost toenails, but they're growing back. I have new toenails coming in, so it'll be fine. So anyway, that was my year 2020. Again, I missed on seeing my friends. We missed a lot of things. I wasn't seeing my parents very much because we were so afraid of COVID, and the couple times I did go over there, we were with masks and socially distanced, which was really difficult not seeing my elderly parents. So it was a very rough year in a lot of ways, but running wise, I had quite a few accomplishments, finishing a couple 100 mile plus, a couple 100Ks, like I said, 20 total races of marathon or longer. I finished running the cities of Bedford and Euless. In my total mileage for the year, the highest I'd ever had before was 3,100 miles in a year, and that was in 2019. This year I ended up with 3,563, which is by far my record, and I do not plan to run that much in 2021. But anyway, so it was quite a year. I ended the year with 88 lifetime races of marathon or longer. And I'm hoping that in 2021, if I stay healthy, I will hopefully get to, or at least get very close to 100 total. Oh, I did leave something out. With the running the rows, winning that running the rows race in my age group, and then winning the finishing second overall in the 48 hour, I actually ended up for the year winning the Trot Cup for Masters, the 50 and over category. I don't think I would have had enough points just from doing those 2 races had the whole season gone, but I'd also planned to run a lot more, so you never know. But for winning my age group 50 to 59, I got a Trail Racing Over Texas backpack that I won. And I also got a Trail Racing Over Texas duffel bag. Now, one of these was for winning my 50 to 59 age group, and one was for overall winning the Masters age group 50 and over, everybody 50 and older. I don't really know which is which. It doesn't really matter. And then the other thing I got, because between the races I ran in person and all the virtuals I ran, I ended up with more than 500 miles of Trail Racing Over Texas races completed. I got this really cool, I don't know if you can see it real well, jacket that has a patch that says TROT for Trail Racing Over Texas 500 Mile Club. Anyway, so very proud of that, and it's very comfortable, and I've been wearing that. So now that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the content and have any interest in following my journey in 2021, please hit the like button or subscribe. Thank you.